Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Grieving Voices. I'm very excited about this episode today because if there is any episode, one episode that you listen to, I hope it's this one because I just feel very good about the hope that this episode will bring to people. Um, I want this episode to cause self-reflection and introspection for you, and to really, as you're listening and after you listen, I want you to send this guest um, all your love and energetic hugs and vibes um, to her. So today's guest, her name is Ann Jacobs. She was born and raised in Michigan and has been living in California for the past 37 years. She's a wife and mom to 3 adult sons, and she was diagnosed initially with stage 3 breast cancer in 2003. Less than a year after her treatment ended, she had a backache that wouldn't go away and eventually was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer, which is the same as stage 4. Those who live with metastatic breast cancer beyond 5 years are called outliers. And today, Ann is going to be sharing her story with us, and I feel very blessed to have her presence here today. Ann, thank you so much for agreeing to be on my podcast and sharing your story.
Thank you,
Welcome.
Victoria, for having me here. I'm humbled and I'm honored. I've enjoyed your podcast, so it's a treat for me to be able to share with you.
Thank you. It's my honor because we've had some email correspondence leading up to today, and it just like I didn't even get my tissues ready, but I'm thinking I might need them. I just feel like the state of the world, um, you know, collectively, each person in this world is going through something, right? And you could have passed me on the street and looking at you, you can't see her, guess, but looking at you, there's nothing that says your body is just full of cancer right now. Like there's nothing in, like, I don't see that on you. And I just want to make that very clear to the listeners because we never know what people are going through. Truly, we never know. So let's start with your diagnosis. Let's start there.
Well, I found a lump in my left breast. I would, by doing a breast self-examination, actually in November of 2002. And I had lumpy breasts. And I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. I didn't really pay any attention to it for November. In December, it was, I couldn't find it. It was obviously still there, but I couldn't find it. And then in January, I felt it again. So I called my gynecologist's office and requested to come in to have him look at it. And then this sort of set the tone for my future cancer journey. I really had to push to get an appointment. I said, I have a lump in my left breast. I need to come in and get it checked out. And the schedule gal said, oh, we're not scheduling those for 3 weeks out. I said,
Oh,
I
wow.
don't think you understand what I meant. I said, and she said, well, if you want to come in, I see that you can come in for your annual exam. And I said, great. So, put me in for that. So I went in about a week. My doctor felt it, sent me right away to get a mammogram. It did not show up on the mammogram because, which I did not know at the time, I had dense breasts, and tumors are hard to see in a mammogram. So I walked across the hall, got an ultrasound. It was there, plus some other questionable spots. Had a biopsy, and by the time I had a biopsy, there were 3 lumps that they biopsied. And then I had surgery. Fortunately, my surgeon, when I met with him, he understood the import of, or the urgency of me getting in he said, we can get you in for surgery for 3 weeks. I said, that's not going to work. I need to get in right away because I intuitively knew this was fast growing, which it was, because when they did the surgery, and I actually had both breasts taken off. It's called a bilateral mastectomy. I had 5 tumors, and this was all within a month, I think. So I did that. I went through treatment, which was aggressive at the time, from March until August of 2003. And then in 2004, we were up at our lake in northern, or cottage in northern Michigan, and I got a really bad backache. But my kids were little, and I'm running around, and I thought, oh, I tweaked my back. So I got a massage that seemed to help. I came back home to California, and the backache didn't go away. So after 2 x-rays, it was determined I had cancer in my lower spine, in the L3, L4, L5 area, in my left hip. And then there was a questionable spot after some more scans, there was a questionable spot of a spot in my lung, which eventually turned out to be cancer. But in 2004, it was so small, they couldn't biopsy. We just watched it. So that's how my metastatic cancer got diagnosed. They didn't do scans after initial treatments back then. They do now. And I think if they had, they probably would have found that the cancer was already there, just based on conversations I've had over the years and things I've learned. But it wouldn't have made a difference, because if it was already there, I would have just started another treatment, 8 months earlier than later. So sometimes you have regrets in life, but I don't worry about that part. So that's how it was diagnosed, and we just went from there. I've been on treatment ever since, and mine is called triple positive, which means in the cancer lingo, I'm hormone receptor positive. You can be estrogen positive or negative, progesterone positive or negative, and any combination of those. So I'm positive for both of them. And I'm also positive for, it's called HER, H-E-R, and the number 2, and then a / N-E-U. HER2/neu, and sometimes they call it just HER2 cancer. So those characteristics are important, because that dictates what type of treatment and drugs that you can have to fight your cancer. So I've been doing that since 2004. Very humbled and blessed to still be here.
Okay, did you all catch that? Since 2004.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's absolutely amazing.
It really is. It really is. And every day when I wake up, I say, thank you for yesterday and thank you for today. And because truthfully, the scary thing about the metastatic breast cancer is that I would be actually right now, because the drug I'm on is keeping me fairly stable. I'd be shocked, but it's not out of the question. Like in 6 months, someone could tell me it's, riddled throughout your body now, because cancer has a mind of its own. That would be quite a surprise, but that's one of the things you live with, is you just don't know, like, if or when the switch is going to flip. Because there's actually a lot of young women with young kids who don't live as long as I do. And there's some women that are living, 20, 25 years out. So I hope to be one of them at some point.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yes.
25. Wow.
It's not like the quote unquote norm, but it's out there. So that gives everybody hope. When you hear, even for me, I know when I talk to women who are first diagnosed in either, in person or online, that knowing that I'm 17 years out gives them hope. So knowing that there's someone who's 25 years out gives me hope.
That's incredible. Um, so as of today, where is the cancer at for you now?
So it's still I had radiation on my left hip, which killed it. That's what I say. Killed the cancer on my left hip. It worked. I still have cancer in my L3, L4, L5 area. I've had radiation in that area as well. And then the spot in my right lung has grown to where I have, well, I think I have about half of my right lung capacity. And it's active in my right lung, but again, it's stable. So what that means for me is that it's not growing in size nor intensity right now. And then my lower spine right now is what they call no evidence of active disease, or NEAD, which means on my last scan, you can see the cancer in the PET scan, this PET CT scan, but the cancer activity is in the normal range, meaning it could, like if you saw it on a scan, you didn't know it was cancer, it could be just some other metabolic thing happening in your body. So I'm very, very grateful. It basically, it hasn't spread from the original diagnosis in 2004, which that's kind of unusual too. Because if this is not, usually the norm is it goes to your bones and then to an organ, and then it can go to your brain. And the organs are usually the lungs or the liver. That's not ground in stone, so to speak, but that's sort of like the normal, I don't want to say normal, or most common path. But there are women who have it in other places in their body as well. And then just in case someone doesn't know, once you have breast cancer in your breast, if it travels to your lung, it's not called lung cancer. If it goes to your liver, it's not liver cancer, or your brain, it's not brain cancer. It's still breast cancer in a different part of your body.
Yes, I've actually learned that over the years as well. It's where it originated. What is a daily day like? What is your day like today? Like, what is a typical day like for you? Man, if I could talk here.
Okay. Well, I have to I wish I could have a typical day. One of the things I do, like I mentioned, when I wake up, I've been saying it for so long. It's this automatic thought of thank you for yesterday and thank you for today. And then I kind of just take stock of, okay, what's happening how do I feel this morning? It depends on what treatment I'm on, if that will allow me to function throughout the day. This one that I'm on right now does. So sometimes I can wake up and I'm exhausted and I think, all right, I'll get up and brush my teeth. That's all I can do. And I have to go back to bed. Some days I get up, brush my teeth and say, oh, I'm feeling okay. I'll get up, I'll take our dog out for a walk. And then it's sort of like checking in with myself throughout the day. There's also days when I can be just going along, and this happened about a month or so, well, probably before Thanksgiving actually now. This was my baking day. I was going to bake and I had everything out and I'm very messy. And something happened and my body just went, I had to be on the couch for the afternoon, and my husband came home and said, okay, we've got flour and baking soda, everything's out. But I have to be prepared. Well, I don't have to be, but I am mentally prepared that I can make a plan and I have to call and cancel. So it's kind of a roller coaster. But my day yesterday, I I felt good, and today I feel good. So I got up, I did take our dog for a walk, and then I took our little dog for a shorter walk. I had to do some paperwork at home, um, trying to get my mom the vaccine, COVID vaccine in Michigan. We're all trying to do that. So worked on that. I cooked dinner. I was out in the garden checking my plants. So it's a very measured kind of time. The days are kind of measured for me as far as my energy level goes. I'm just checking in, and I've learned over the years, okay, if I have a big day on Saturday, let's not have a big day Sunday, just kind of a recuperation day. And then we'll see how Monday goes. And the drug I'm on now, it's called Enhertu. I'm handling the side effects really well. The last drug that I didn't, it was a true chemo drug. It's called Abraxane, and it worked really well on my cancer. Kept it at bay, kept it stable, but my quality of life got to be, I literally couldn't even get out of bed to go brush my teeth, walk across the room, brush my teeth. So that was like an Olympic event for me. And then I said to my oncologist, okay, I'm at the fork in the road. I can't do this one anymore. Let's, what else, what other options do I have? So it can be an emotionally exhausting existence. It can be, I can run the gamut of emotions in one day, or I can just get up and like, okay, I'm feeling good. We're just going to power through. Or I can get up and just feel good and I don't have to power through. So it's this balance of what do I need emotionally? What do I need physically, spiritually? Kind of combination of things. I don't know if that answers your question. I hope I didn't confuse too many people, but.
No, absolutely. But I think that's a wonderful point to bring across just for anybody to check in with yourself. Like you said, when you're having a big day Saturday, maybe Sunday is not, you take it easy. And I think that's a good lesson, just a rule of life. It's like, why does it take us to have a cancer diagnosis to check in with how we feel, with what's going on with us?
Yes, when you said that, I kind of got choked up a little bit, because when I got the metastatic, when we got the first diagnosis, it was okay. There's a beginning to treatment and an end to treatment. So we will, as a family, we've got these bookends, beginning and a start. And then when I got the metastatic, it was just like, oh my God, everything the calendar went from, volunteering, carpool, helping friends, everything. It cleared out. And I said no. I had to say no to everything, because the cancer gave me the permission to do that, like you just said. And during that time, it was actually very freeing. I remember this, and I thought, holy cow, I was really doing probably too much before. But I loved volunteering. I loved seeing people. I loved carpooling with the kids. I wasn't doing anything I didn't love. Well, for the most part. But when I had to clear the calendar, it felt very freeing. Like, okay, now what do we want to put back in, purposely put back in? And that was an unexpected, and what I call almost like a non-cancer feeling. Because like you said, you can do that I could have done that at any time, but there was a part of me that felt like, well, I should do this, or I have to do this, when I really didn't. You could just clear the calendar and say purposely, all right, what do, we have a family, so what do I have to do? What are the priorities? Just take that time to sit down and focus on that instead of, for me, I'd say yes to everything. So that made actually a big difference. I don't know, in the non-cancer quality of life, if you know, world, if you will. So
It forced you to live with intention.
yes, yes, because I do. Yes, absolutely. That's perfect. Yes. Yeah.
So what was, like, how did, when you had, then when that kind of hit you, when you had time to process, some time went by and you said your kids were little. What was that grief that you experienced? And I don't want to impose that you had grief. Maybe you don't maybe you probably didn't recognize it at the time, but in hindsight, maybe. What were the things that you were going through and feeling, having young children and having this diagnosis, and not maybe being able to do the things that you wanted to do with them?
Right.
And maybe your career, I mean, that obviously probably changed, or, you know, whatever you were doing with your life up to that point. And the volunteering, like you couldn't volunteer then. So it's like freeing at first, but then when some time passed, what were you feeling when that kind of hit you?
I think you're right. I didn't look at it then as grieving or grief. I used the word loss quite a bit. You know, I had sort of different categories of loss. You know, you start with the first surgery. You know, I wanted both of my breasts gone. My right breast, you know, was fine, but I considered it to be fertile ground. And I wanted to do everything I could to, you know, ironically, not have the cancer come back. So I didn't have a problem with that, but I shouldn't say but, and it took me a long time to look at my scars on my chest, and it forced me to think about, well, how do the breasts define me, you know, as women? You know, my femininity, my sexuality, aesthetically, you know, you're wearing clothes. So there is a sense, this was like a brief sense, but I know for some women it's a bigger sense. There's a sense of loss there, which then sort of segues into like your loss of self. Like, this is who I was before, who am I now? And it forced me to, well, it didn't force, I actually chose to just think about this. Who am I at my core? Who do I want to be at my core? What is my core? Because as you know, a mom with younger kids, you don't have that. I didn't have that time. I didn't really take that time. You know, I was, you know, put my son's name in front, you know, Colin's mom, you know, and, or, you know, you're defined by other things, but, you know, what defines me? And then I also had like the loss of being able to physically do the things I wanted to do. I loved running, loved running. I just stopped running because I didn't want to do any damage to my spine. Again, I know there's women who have bone mets and they run and it works for them, which is, I'm envious, but it wasn't going to work for me. So I had to stop and I had to rethink, okay, how am I going to keep physically active? Because that's important. And then like the loss of future plans. Just, we couldn't plan, you know, oh, let's take a trip to Europe next year with the kids. Well, that's out of the question, you know, unless we can't plan that far ahead. And then there's sort of the losses of, you know, that nobody could see. Like you mentioned earlier, if someone looks at me, they're not going to know I have metastatic breast cancer. And that's true of so many women. But you don't see the there's losses that you don't see that are, that I'm camouflaging, or I'm not talking about to certain people, or maybe I had a bad day and I keep it to myself. So, and then on top of all of that is, and I guess those I put in like the loss category, although now I know that that is grieving. But when the big grief comes is, I've been here for 17 years. Is this, what if this is like next year is 18 and it's my time up? And then I can go down a rabbit hole kind of quickly, but I've learned how to pull myself out. But I'm going to see my kids get married. Am I going to, miss out? Are they going to have kids? Or, what are, I'm not going to hear about their tennis game or the walk they took, or, what happened at work today. And, and I won't be with my husband, and I'll miss out on, what he's doing. And sometimes I tease him. I say, you have to retire before I leave. So we have time. But that's when for me, I get a huge sense of grief when I think about not being here and missing out on what's going on with my kids and what's going on with my husband. And that will actually, I will feel emotionally that grief. And then I also physically feel like I can, if it's a really bad day, I will get lightheaded. I will get cold. I'll physically feel cold. And there's probably like a panic feeling that if I allow myself to get that far, but then I'll pull out of it out of habit. I use one of my father-in-law's things that he told me. He's unfortunately passed away, but he was alive when I was diagnosed with the metastatic cancer, and he lived out here close to us. And he said, he looked me right, I can still see his face. He looked me right in the eye and he said, "Ann, right now you're here. The boys are here. Chris is here. You're okay. And tomorrow you're going to be okay. So let's just focus on that." And so when I feel myself going down the rabbit hole, I remember those words, and then that just pulls me back up, because, he was a World War II veteran, and he had 9 lives, and he was a very strong man, that he went through some horrific things. And so if I feel myself, I can't get out of it. If I'm down that deep, I just think, okay, George, here I'm coming up. Yes, right now, right in this moment, I'm okay. The kids are okay. Chris is okay. I'm here, and then I start to look around. Yeah, the house is a mess. Don't care. But we have a house, we have a car, we have dogs. I have, my mom is still here. My siblings are still here. I have good friends. And so I run through this checklist, and I actually touch each finger every time I say something. And that usually will bring me back up, and I'll say, all right, here we go. Let's, again, taking stock. All right, and what do you want to do next? I feel like I'm rambling. I'm sorry. But
as I wipe my tears.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you for sharing all of that.
You're welcome. I kind of feel like I lost track of what the initial question was, but the grief. Yeah, it's a lot of it's just constant. That sometimes I'll use it's like a picture in my mind of I'm walking on a lake that's frozen over, and sometimes the ice is really thick to keep me from, going down the rabbit hole. Sometimes it's really thin, and I can, I see all that, the what ifs. What if the treatment stops working? What if I don't have any more options? All that stuff. It's right there. I can see it. But right now, I don't allow myself to like fall through the ice, because I probably at some point I'm going to. I don't know that, but I have stage 4 cancer. So I hope I live to be, there's survivors out there who are 25 years out, and they give me hope. And I know that I'm 17 years out, and I know I give women who are, have less years, I give them hope. So I don't know when my time is, but I don't want to fall down that. I don't want the ice to completely crack yet, because it doesn't have to crack yet. But with that said, all of that fear, all of the what ifs, it's always there. And then sometimes, you never know, like a little drop in the bucket can overflow the bucket. And so I have days like that as well. I could, some little thing can just be too much for me, and I'll completely crack and have a breakdown, and I'm sobbing for 15 minutes, which I don't mind anymore. My tears used to scare me because of the intensity, but now I know, I just let it come out. What do they call it? An ugly cry. I have, I have those. But I think for me, dealing with the loss and the grief, I've had to reinvent myself. And I guess I have these two categories. The losses, I can say, okay, yeah, I couldn't go back to work when our youngest was in first grade, but for a year and a half, I could work part-time because I felt good enough, and I could do that. Or for 2 years when I felt good enough, I could volunteer for my kids' lacrosse teams. I could drive up to see our oldest in college, and spend a day with him. So it was okay. I can't do this, and this, I can't run, but I can ride my bike, and I can walk. Do I miss running? Yes. Do I watch other people run and just go, oh, I wish that was me? Absolutely. But then the next thought is, oh yeah, but I'm here, and I can walk, and I can ride my bike, because someday I won't be able to. So I replace a loss. I try to replace a loss with something else. And that's kind of what's kept me going. I tried knitting for a while when some of my treatments kept me in the chair for, 6 hours. And if anyone needs 10 half finished scarves, I have them for you. So I try different things. When my kids were playing lacrosse, I was on the field, and I took pictures of the team and them playing, and I loved doing that, so I would try to find something, and I try to do this every day. I try to, find something that brings me a little bit of joy. And, it can be anything. It could be, I'm out on a walk. Well, I'm always happy to be out on a walk, but I could see a rock that's in the shape of a heart. Or if I'm on Facebook and there's a gal I know who, she posts pictures of nature. There's 2 of them. They just post these beautiful pictures of, places that maybe I can't go. And I'll just think, oh my God, that picture's beautiful. And that brings me happiness. So I've learned to find the little positive things or joy, even in just the smallest. That's not to say I don't have my bad days. That's not to say there aren't days when I wake up and go, this cancer, expletive, and I get mad at it. But it's like an unwanted house guest. It's never going away, and it's going to
Hey,
rear its ugly head.
you know what? You don't need my permission to cuss on here because I think
Oh,
you've earned that right. I'll gladly check that box that it's explicit because I'll say fuck cancer
yeah.
right along with you because it took my dad and it
Oh,
can just
oh,
it can
sorry.
just
Yeah,
go somewhere else.
cancer is right. I
Thank
mean,
you. Thank you.
yeah, it's taken too many people I know.
That just might be the title of this podcast episode. Maybe I don't know if I can do that, but I'm going to try. Just for you. Just for you.
Well, yeah.
I want to make a distinction on something you said because you mentioned a phrase that we say in grief recovery, and it's replacing the loss, because that's a myth that's a myth of grief. It's one of the 6 myths of grief, in that we learn to do that. But you're not doing that. You're not replacing a loss.
No.
You're looking for an experience that of something you can do.
Yeah.
And I just want to make that distinction because replacing the loss is something that makes you feel better you're doing that to make yourself feel better. And for you, it's what your body is capable of doing that day. So that's the difference I want to share. But your losses, that is grief, because grief is, by definition, from the Grief Recovery Institute, a change in or an end of familiar pattern of behavior. It's anything we wish would have been different, better, or more. And it's a loss of hopes, dreams, and expectations. If there is any story that is the epitome of grief, it is your diagnosis and prognosis and everything in between, from that bookend to the other, from one bookend to the other. And what have been some of the unhelpful and hurtful things that you've heard along the way?
They mostly happened, early on. Oh, shoot. Sorry.
Just start over.
Hello? Oh, sorry. Oh, wasn't supposed to happen.
You can take that.
No.
I can edit this out.
No. I thought I turned everything off. It happened early on, and mostly with people who felt like they needed to say something when they probably would have just been better off not to say anything or not approach me. And it was, when I was, my kids were in elementary and middle school. So I was at school. Your kids are in school, so you're around more people. Now, they're grown, 2 are out working, one's, finishing up college. So you're not around other parents as much. And so they would say, what they didn't understand the metastatic part of it. Everyone understands, you're going through cancer treatment in the beginning, and then your hair grows back and you start to become, normal looking. And so then people adjust to that and say, oh, she's getting better. But then when you get the metastatic, like you said, I don't look like I have cancer. I mean, there's days I do, but most days if someone looked at me, they wouldn't know. So they would say things like, oh, you'll get over this soon, or you look great, you must be feeling really well. Or if I had to cancel an appointment, they'd get upset. I'd say, I'm sorry, I just can't make it. I'm not feeling great today. So there's a huge disconnect because, well, you look good, so therefore you should feel good. So I went through that a lot. I learned early on how to deflect. I had a sense of, okay, here comes a mom that I don't want to talk to. She's just is coming up to me because maybe she feels like she should, because she caught my eye and she doesn't know what else to do. And she would start to say something. And if I felt uncomfortable, I would just kind of interrupt her and say, oh, how's your kid doing? Or, how's baseball going? Or, I would change the subject abruptly. Just because I didn't want to hear anything else that person wanted to say. I've had some people say, well, everybody can die. You can get hit by a bus tomorrow.
Are you kidding me?
No. And I'll say, well, and I never know and now I know, like, what I would say, well, you know what? I'm actually playing in the freeway. So
Exactly, right?
you're off on the sidewalk. You're just hoping some random freak accident doesn't happen. But like, I'm in the road. But yeah, people have said that. And some people forget, which, they're good people. And they'll say, are you done with treatment? And I'll say, no, I'm never going to be done with treatment. I'll be done with treatment when I'm dead. It's like, oh, and that may sound like kind of a harsh thing, but, I don't say it in anger. I try to, I try to cover it up with like a smile or, ease them into it, but still make my point. Because I understand, like, the neighbor 5 doors down it's not their job to keep track of, what I'm doing. Everyone's lives are so busy. So people just forget. And so sometimes I'm very matter of fact about that. Other times I'll say, no, I'm still on treatment. I'll always be on treatment and then I'll explain it. I have cancer that's in my bones and in my, lung. It's never going to go away. And I just hope that I'm stable for as long as possible. It just depends on the conversation of how I feel about the person, my energy level, if I want to talk about it. Because there are times when someone will say something really stupid and I'll take that time to educate them. Not that they're going to remember in a week, but, maybe something resonates. But there's a whole list of comments that people say because they just don't know what to say. And sometimes it's just okay to, they say, how you doing? And I'll say, I'm pretty good. Treatment's going well. And all they would have to say is, great. Well, I hope it's working. The comments of, oh, but you look so good. Those are like, yeah, I know. It's always, don't focus on the exterior, but ask about the interior. Like, how's your day going so far today? Or, if it's a relationship where they can ask it, is there anything you need? I'm not good at asking for help. And I'll segue a little bit. When I was first diagnosed and my mom came out, I think my sister was out for a little bit and my mom came out for a while. My friends were thrilled that my mom was here because she'd answer the phone. Well, does Ann need anything? She'd say, yes. I'm going to Target. Yes, we need a new twin mattress pad. We need some orange juice. She would, and they were like, "Wow, your mom's so great. She's letting us help you." So then we just have like here's my debit card. Just give it to them, or give them cash when they get back. But and that also, it kind of goes back into when people say silly stuff. When somebody, and this is human nature, I think, when someone's sick, they rally around, which is humbling and overwhelming and just full of love. And then when the crisis goes away, then, people go on with their lives. Some people stay, some people leave, new people come in. And it's kind of I know I've gone off on a different little topic, but that kind of is part of the when people say silly stuff or stuff that hurts me, you realize, okay, well, I volunteered with this person. They were really nice. We worked really well together, but now I'm in a different place and she doesn't want to be in my life, which is okay. And, you know, she goes off and you could say there's a void there, but usually somebody else will come in. Like there's a gal who, when my kids were in preschool, there's another mom and she knocked on my door and she said, I'm doing your laundry. She just came in, she did my laundry, folded it, left. And I saw her all the time in preschool, but I never saw her after that. And it was just she said, you sit on the couch, do not move, because she knew I would want to get up and help. She came in and left. And it was just the best thing for me that day. And so I've learned that I don't have too many people in my life anymore that say the stupid stuff. So that's kind of a blessing. And if anyone says, if any of my friends say, you know, you look pretty good, I know it's coming from their heart because they've been through this journey with me. They know me at my worst. So that means something different than the superficial of, oh, you're still in treatment. Well, you don't look like it. You know, I know they're trying to be encouraging, but after a while, it's just like, you know, heavy breath, heavy sigh. Okay, let's move on to talk about something else because they don't get it and I don't want them to get it.
Yeah, it's like definitely having to discern and cherry pick and it's like this dance, a daily dance, I imagine, with all the relationships. And because if you think about, especially when your kids were younger and you were out and about and you're doing things and life was going on and life was happening, I can't imagine, like I've never taken count, but when I do go out and about and I'm out in the world, it's like how many connections and interactions do we have in a single day?
Mm-hmm.
And I imagine that can get pretty exhausting if every person is asking you or saying something insensitive and not really thinking before they're speaking. And you must get home at the end of the day sometimes and just be like, gosh, like people exhaust me. Like I just want to stay home. Like it's just easier to stay home. So how do you not isolate yourself and discern? How have you discerned? Well, I guess you kind of answered that, like how you kind of figured out basically the people that have stuck around beside you since the very beginning are the people that you lean on today. Is that true?
Yeah. 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 There's like, you know, last year, we're all in isolation, COVID and the pandemic. And for, I don't know if this is good or bad, but for me, my life interactions didn't really change a whole lot because I've always had to be careful about my immune system. And so I developed habits, you know, before the pandemic of learning how to be okay in the house by myself for extended, you know, my husband, he gets up and goes to work every day. It's just amazing. But it's for his mental health too. He couldn't really work well from home. So his office is close by. And then when our youngest went off to college, I'm here with our dogs. So I have to find ways to not feel too isolated. And there was a time when my immune system was super, super low. And it was like for everybody else last year with the pandemic of, oh my gosh, we can't go anywhere. But this was, for me, it was before the pandemic. And I asked my husband, I'm going to bring my laptop and just sit in your back room and, you know, work on my laptop for like a couple hours because I can't stand being home by myself. And then some days during that time, and I wasn't able to get out and walk, he'd come home and I'd be like the Labrador talk, oh, can we go in the car for a ride? You know, roll the window down and, you know, maybe we'd go to Habit Burger and he'd get his, you know, he'd walk in and get his dinner because I couldn't be around a lot of people. So it was, again, I go back to, you know, just finding something positive in the day that I can do where I would, you know, feel accomplished, even though I can't see people. But with that, you know, I have a friend who I can just call and just start talking. I have a few friends like that. I just start talking and, you know, we already know what we're talking about. And that's really helpful.
Do you need to get a cord?
Yeah.
Okay. You can leave it there and go grab your cord. I'm going to run to the restroom.
Okay.
I'll edit this out. It's okay. Because I don't want your internet to suffer. You know,
Yeah.
just grab your cord. Okay. I'll be right back too.
I don't know how to. Sorry.
Nope, you're fine. It's good. Oh, and I hear my fan. Can you hear my fan?
No, not at all. Am I rambling too much?
No, you're doing just fine.
Okay. Plus you can edit.
I can. Okay. All right. Let me. You gave a wonderful piece of advice that was shared with you about having today and, you know, just focus on that. But is there any other pieces of advice that you've received over the years that maybe would be helpful to someone else who's maybe been recently diagnosed or just for humanity in general?
Remember to breathe. That sounds like a very simple thing, but when I was diagnosed with the metastatic cancer and I lost my ability to just like, okay, we're going to attack this. What do we do? So I just remember I had to just take some time and actually feel myself breathe, take those big, deep breaths. It was grounding and it, you know, kind of brought me back to center. And it sounds, you know, really basic and simple, but it is, because I would find myself tensing up and taking, you know, shorter breaths when I would become anxious. So it just has a natural calming effect. It did for me on my body. I had, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, is that something you still practice? And what are some other things that you bring into your daily life that keep you grounded and have sustained you? What do you, yeah, as far as like you mentioned the breathing, do you do meditation? Is there anything else you've incorporated into your day?
Yeah, I do the breathing. I usually do it in the morning when I get up and I'll make a smoothie and I take my supplements and um, I'm just sitting and I'll just breathe just to start the morning off. I also listen to affirmation, visualization. Um, it used to be a CD, but now it's on my phone. And I listen to it so much I can just recite it in my mind. And if that helps me kind of stay grounded too. The other thing is that, I'll text or talk with friends. And sometimes I'll get distracted, by whatever conversation we're having. And that's a good thing. I do stretches. I do. So, I mean, that's like for more of my emotional kind of centering. For my physical, I do, like I said, I walk. I've worked up to being able to do squats because one of the treatments left my left leg muscle super, super weak to where I couldn't bend down to pick anything up. I fell over in the Rite Aid. I was trying to get something off the bottom shelf. I thought, oh my God, how am I going to get back up? But so I've worked up to where now I can do squats with 10-pound weights. It's taken me, I think, 3 years to get to this point. I do a little weight routine with my arms. And then when I feel, good enough, I can be out in the backyard doing yard work. So that kind of helps me keep my physical strength up. The affirmations, visualizations, it really helps. I think, I don't know if it's your subconscious or it's maybe like a little tape that's running in the back of my mind. It gives me strength because I don't know if it's a false sense of security, which I don't think it is, because I believe that our thoughts affect, our emotions and our approach in life and our physical well-being as well. But it gives me the sense that I have control. I put the control in quotes, because the affirmation visualization is about my body and my immune system attacking the cancer and washing it away. It's a really, there's so many out there, and I found one that spoke to me. That's very, very helpful. The other thing, it might sound kind of odd, and I don't do this too often, is I'll sit down and I'll write letters I just wrote a long one to my mom. And whether it's a quick note or, a long letter, I like the feeling of the pen to paper. And I always have, but that's something that kind of came back to me. It's like the flowing of the words out onto the paper. And that's different for me. That's different than just typing in a journal. I don't do a lot of journaling. I know a lot of people do, because a lot of times the tapes are running in my head anyway, and I'm talking about it and I don't want to like write it down. I'll write important things down, but the letter writing is helpful for some reason as well.
Have you written letters to your boys?
That I have written them, but not for a while. I have not written them about the cancer. But what one of my sons asked me is if I would keep track, like when I get a memory from, you know, growing up or just something, you know, college, or he says, will you write that down? So I haven't been very good about it for the last, it's a year and a half, but I have done that. And it's that writing the letters to my boys is actually something that is on, it's been on my mind. Because I know when you read something, it's on paper, it's different than when someone tells you. I tell them, you know, I tell all three of them, you guys are amazing. I'm humbled to be your mom. I don't know why I got chosen because I just think the world of them, and I love them fiercely, and they know that. But I also know that saying that, which is good to hear, is different than having this tangible piece of paper with your mom's handwriting on it. You know, it's from her. I have, you know, I have a whole box of my mom's letters and cards for, you know, from the last I don't know, forever. And so when you open that card and you see her handwriting, that's her. You know, I hear her words too, which are, you know, amazing, but here's this tangible piece of her right there. So it's, you know, it's a great question, because I've been thinking about that. I thought about it all January, and January is kind of a little crazy month for me, but it's still on my mind to do. So it's really interesting you asked that question. You must have intuitively known.
And speaking of intuition, and I'll just say this too, that it's something you can do and just put in an envelope and save for them.
Yes.
Give them later, you know, it's not something you have to give right away after you write it. But speaking of intuition, well, first of all, I want to just mention something with the breathing. I listened to a podcast episode with Lewis Howes. Lewis Howes, I think is how he says it. And I'll put it in the show notes as well. But he interviewed James Nestor, who wrote the book Breath. And he talks a lot about how the impact of our breath, and really and how the diaphragm is really like the second heart. And it's such a good episode. I've been so much more conscious of my breath, and so many of us breathe through our mouths, which is horrible. It's horrible for us. I highly recommend listening to that episode.
Okay.
So I just wanted to mention that. Also, too, you mentioned about the visualization of feeling your body being like washed away, like this cancer being washed away. And I thought of Louise Hay, who wrote the book You Can Heal Your Life, and she talks a lot about like she actually healed herself of it was cancer of her reproductive organs. I can't remember which. I don't know if it's uterine or which, but that made me think of that. But she talked about visualization of it literally being washed away. And so I want to talk about the intuition piece, because intuition played a huge role in our email correspondence. You mentioned your intuition, how you fired your first oncologist, and you just had this instinct within you. And so, I mean, it obviously served you well then, but how, and you mentioned even the mind-body connection, which I love that as well. So can you speak just a little bit to intuition and how that has played a role in how you've navigated this ugly thing?
So I've had instances of intuition before cancer, and the first one I had, I think, was, I don't know how old I was. I guess we could figure it out. But my best friend growing up, she called. She lived next door, and she called, and I answered the phone. Of course, it's the rotary phone with the cord. You know, one phone in the house. And she said, "Guess what?" And in my mind, I said, "Oh my gosh, you know, her brother and his wife, you know, Jan, they're going to have a baby." And I didn't want to spoil it. So I said, what? And she's, Jan's pregnant. And I said, oh my gosh, that's great. And I thought, well, that was weird. And so I've had things like that happen throughout my life. I have a dream. I had a dream about one of my nieces. This was years ago, and she was on stage giving a speech, and I can't remember the whole thing. So, but I don't remember if I talked to her or I sent a text or somehow I contacted my brother and my sister-in-law and her, about her being strong and she can do this. And they said, well, there was some parallel in activity happening at there, and they don't live near us. They live states away. And so I thought, okay, well, that's I've had these little things. So I've learned tentatively to sort of trust that voice in my head. But now cancer came, what you were talking about, the way I just got assigned an oncologist. And so my husband and I went and saw him, and he did nothing wrong. In other words, he did everything right. He explained everything, made sure I understood. He wrote pictures on paper when he was great. He was kind, he was compassionate. And during the appointment, my heart started beating super fast. I started sweating. I couldn't wait to get out of the room. And when we got out of the building, at the time, I really swore. And I said to my husband, there's no effing way I'm going back to him. I have to get a new oncologist. And my husband, he's in tune with a lot of, medical stuff, even though he's not in the medical field. He's like, oh my gosh, why? This guy was great. I said, I don't know. I just can't have him. So, and I think I wrote in the email, it was that mama bear feeling that you would feel for your kids, where you will walk through fire for them. That's what I was feeling about myself. That was brand new. I'd never felt that before. So I had to pursue it. I had to get a new oncologist. At the time, there was only one oncology group that I had access to. And I called them and said, I need a new doctor. And they were just, oh my gosh, what happened? And finally I talked to, I don't know, however many people at the group. And I just said, look, just label me the crazy cancer lady. I'm really sorry, but I just needed a different doctor. And so the oncologist that they gave me to, I just attribute him to saving my life early on, because we worked so well together, and he worked really well with my husband. He was actually disappointed when my husband wasn't at the doctor appointments, but I learned from him. And he was the first oncologist, is younger. And my second one he was a little older than me, I think, but he taught me about myself and cancer. He taught me how to approach cancer. He taught me, and this was just through interaction, what questions to ask, what I needed to be focused on, if my numbers were going up, they weren't going up that too far. So we didn't have to change treatment. If they went up to a certain level, then we would. So I learned all of this stuff, and I just have to assume that I would have not learned that with the other one. So I trusted my intuition there, and that kind of put the big stamp on my intuition. So now even my husband, it's like, I said, honey, I just think we should do it this way. He'll say, okay, I get it. And when you talked about the mind-body connection as well, growing up, I was always very active outside. Growing up in Michigan, we had 2 acres of land. Our neighbors had 3 and 4 and 5, no fences. And we were you just go out and play. I played soccer in high school. I've always understood I've had this connection with my body. Like when it does this, then it means this. I had to relearn that specifically when it came to the cancer. But I've always had this sort of mind-body connection. And I think it's really important, regardless if you have, a disease or not. I just think it serves you really well if you can understand what's happening, with your body. Like, okay, someone's talking to me about something I feel really insecure about. And now, my heart is beating 100 miles an hour. Why is that? What can I do to calm down? And those kinds of things happen to everybody throughout life every day. So I think the earlier you start with that, and it's never too late, and it does take time. That's why the breathing helps. It does take time to just like, sit down. What's going on? Let's tune in. And then I think that gives you an advantage to then serve yourself better than you might have if you hadn't. And it's something stuck in my head from something earlier. I don't know if I said, I think maybe it's something you said. And I was talking about, when people would come up and ask me questions. And I have a dear friend who, she taught me it was okay to set boundaries when you feel uncomfortable or when it may not be socially acceptable. And she's an amazing woman. And she would say, yeah, they go to see her daughter play a game, and depending on how they just took care of themselves. Maybe they didn't sit with everybody that day. They'd sit farther away. She taught me it was okay to say no. She taught me it was okay to take care of yourself. Even with family members, that you got to pay attention to what's happening inside you and then make a decision of how you want to move forward. So those things, those types of interactions I've had with people and friends have bolstered, my confidence in my intuition, in that mind-body connection, to say, yes, it is okay. And I've learned also over the years, when I haven't listened to my intuition, then I think, shoot, I should have listened. So it's a trial, for me, it was a trial by error as well. Like, okay, I get it. Now when the thought or the feeling comes up, I just go with it and I'll talk about it to who, if it's my oncologist. Like I did that. The most recent one was when I started the cancer drug, and it's, I'm also taking an infusion for it's immunoglobulin, but it's an infusion. It's called IVIG, and it's to bolster my immune system. And I was getting this new drug and that one either the same week or a week apart, and I was miserable, just miserable. And I said, I can't do this. Can we like separate them by 2 weeks just to give my body a chance to, catch up? And that's made a world of difference. Now, like, I'm fine after each, relatively fine after each treatment. I don't feel like I've been hit by a 2x4, but that was from, years of listening to the thought comes up. Oh, okay. I'm going to pay attention to that mind-body connection of you going through a treatment. How do you feel? And again, it doesn't have to be treatment. It could be, you have to give a presentation somewhere. Well, I get stressed out. What can I do to calm myself down? So if you take that time to learn about yourself, I think it really serves you well, whether you have cancer or not. But I do start with the breathing.
I love all of that. All of it, all of it, all of it. And I know I briefly mentioned to you over email about how I'm a Reiki master.
Yes.
and I do
Yes.
the energy healing work. And I'm just curious, have you ever had a Reiki session?
I have not. There was years ago I was going to, and then probably something, I- I'm sure it was, something happened with me and I couldn't go through with it. And then, when you mentioned, I thought, oh, I should look into that. I remember at the time I was asking around and I finally found someone that was recommended and I felt comfortable with, but so I'll have to start that search over. But I
No,
have
you
found,
don't. No, you don't. I'm right
oh, that's
here.
right. I mean, luckily, no, I don't.
You got a hookup.
Yeah. Yeah. I will take advantage of it. Yes. After the podcast, but yeah, it's come back around. And when I read that in the email, I thought, oh, I should revisit that. Because
I
it's,
bring I bring that up because what you all shared, and because I didn't understand that concept of how our body speaks,
Mhm.
right? Until I made the first of all, in grief recovery, after going through grief recovery, I made the connection of how grief was manifesting in my body and in my life, and tying that to grief. That's definitely what is going on with us internally, emotionally, and like you said, our thoughts is reflected within our bodies. And our body speaks to us. It's just we do things to band aid and feel better. We might drink, or we might do other things that just kind of enable us to numb out. And that only obviously does more damage. And then we have shame, and so it compounds, right? And so I love that you brought that up. And I just want to just highlight that, in that why does it take a diagnosis for us to make that connection? So this leads me to the question of, have you ever found yourself just incredibly frustrated by people maybe close to you or in your life, or maybe acquaintances, or people that kind of maybe complain about this, that, or the other thing, or aren't taking care of themselves? Does that ever like does have you ever found yourself like just really just frustrated with someone who, you know, who just
Yeah.
isn't waking up in their own life?
Yes. It brings to mind, uh, this is years ago because I think both, I don't know, I think my youngest was in middle school, and the school he's at, one of the teachers had breast cancer, maybe stage 2. So she went through treatment. She was doing fine, thankfully. But she had a mom in her class who was diagnosed with breast cancer. And, Ann, do you want to talk to her? And it's like, yes, because probably, as you can tell, I'll just talk and talk and talk to anybody. But so I talked with her, and she had 2 little kids. One was in, let's say, I don't know, first or second grade, and one was in kindergarten. And she was just diagnosed. I don't think it was metastatic. It could have been, but she was seeing, she did not want to see sometimes they're called conventional oncologists. She was seeing it was just maybe integrative, which is great because I see an integrative nurse practitioner. But this was someone in the Bay Area it was more of the natural approach. And when she talked to me about her cancer, it's like, oh, I said, I had to be very careful because I wanted to just scream at her, oh my God, are you crazy? You have to start regular treatment. Your cancer is not getting any better. It's getting worse. I mean, my head was screaming. You have these 2 beautiful kids. You got to do everything you possibly can to stay around. Like, what the fuck? but I could, that's what was going on in my head, but I couldn't. And outwardly, I was just like, okay, well, you might consider, I really think, your cancer's progressing faster than you might believe. I at least go talk to the conventional oncologist, see what they have to say. And she refused. I thought, okay, I talked to her a couple more times, and then I didn't see her anymore. And I did not want to know. Selfishly, I just did not want to know what happened. I could have asked the teacher. She would have told me, because I was, on good terms with her. And but I just could not handle if she died, I couldn't handle it for me selfishly. I just didn't want to have that knowledge, because in my mind, she wasn't, and again, this is me. She was doing what she believed was right. But I was like, oh you're not doing everything possible you can to stay around. You're not exhausting all of your resources. So that is very frustrating for me. And I've talked.
I just want to make this key distinction too. I just want to bring up for anyone listening who might be in that position. Even if you don't pursue that treatment, I feel like I have to say this, so I'm going to say it. Yeah. Even if you do not pursue that treatment, it's coming from it with information. It's being fully informed.
Yes.
And then having the confidence that you made the right decision.
Yes. Yeah. 1,000%. Knowledge is power. You are so right. Just absolutely. And just give me, whether it's cancer or any other situation, give me all the information so I can process it and fully understand it to my capability, and then I'll know how to move forward. That's kind of like just a personality trait of mine.
Mine too.
Yeah.
It's how I'm wired. We can talk about, that's a whole nother topic. I'm going through a certification program right now that's all about strengths and values and how we show up in the world and how we're wired, and
really?
Input. Yes, input is one of my top 5 strengths. Yeah, input. So I need all the information. That's how that's the fuel in my life. But yeah,
I might have to talk to you about that later.
Yeah, I would love to.
Yeah. But for as far as cancer goes, that to me is very, very frustrating. To your point, exactly. Just get all the information and then make your decision. I've got 2 other frustrations. One is that I don't know if you want to call them celebrities, but people who are out there in the spotlight, and they get diagnosed with cancer, whether it's metastatic or stage, 1 through 3. And they come out, which I think is great, and they say, I have breast cancer. But they make it look so easy compared to the realities of what, and I know I'm speaking for thousands of women because I'm on a discussion board, and whenever something like this happens, everyone just chimes in. They just make it look easy. And then they also have all these resources available to them that the common person doesn't have, that doesn't get acknowledged. And so that might add to this sense of, oh, she's breast cancer, but it's going to be fine because, this movie star, the celebrity, or this other person in the spotlight, they got it and they did okay. I know that it's very frustrating. It's frustrating for me. It's also frustrating for many others, because whether they go through some really hard times, they don't really talk about it. It doesn't, there's no commonality. It's like, oh, they're off here in another sphere. And then here we are left to wondering, do my kids have clean underwear today? I can't remember if I did stuff to that level. So,
oh wait, did the maid do the laundry?
Right. Yeah.
I think too. And I've actually interviewed an actress on my podcast, very down to earth, I love talking with her. But I think it's acknowledging. I think if they would acknowledge the
Yeah.
privilege,
Yeah.
that would make all the difference.
That's, yes. Thank you for saying that. That's it. Yep. It would make all the difference. It really would. And then the other one is tragically when somebody dies of metastatic breast cancer, it's very rare that the article, and again, this is someone who's in the public eye, it's very rare that the article will say, she died of metastatic breast cancer. They'll say, it'll say she died of breast cancer, but that's not the whole story, because you don't die from stage 1, 2, and 3. There may be there may be like comorbidities, I think is the word. But if you're going to die of breast cancer, it's going to be because you're stage 4. So there's this balance of respecting whoever is in the spotlight, their family and the privacy, because it's a horrific thing. And balance that with you can educate the public more about that it was metastatic and how long did she live with the metastatic. Because some women lived less than 5, and like I said, there's women who are 25 out, and so you get a more realistic picture. And I've had discussions, for me, if I were in the spotlight, it would be, yeah, put it all out there. Let everybody know what I went through so that other people can understand. But I also respect that somebody's family doesn't want to do that because of the privacy. I totally get that. But those 3 things those are my frustrations. And I have the last 2, I can't really do anything about. The first one is I can allow myself how much exposure do I have to someone who isn't getting the whole picture, who's just doing a very narrow, and usually it's not, if it's a narrow focus, it's the natural way, which there's nothing wrong with it. And I take supplements and I do conventional treatment, and I'm talking with the integrated nurse practitioner. So like you said, it's trying to get the whole picture so I can work with my medical team to make the best decision for me. So, but I can affect that. The other 2, I can't really do any. Those are just like peripheral frustrations. But the one that sort of speaks to my heart is if you're just focused on the natural stuff, because I'm in another discussion board where the focus is more of the integrative, more natural approach. And I joined that because I wanted to be educated, because some of these women they are just so full of knowledge. It's an amazing amount of research and that they do. And so I wanted to tap into that. And I was grateful that I could join. And I realized that there are some women who they say, well, I've tried the natural path for a couple of years and now my whole body's metastatic. And I'm like, oh, I can't read this. Because it's their choice. And I'm not dismissive of it. I just know how it affects me. It breaks my heart, because I believe there's a balance. For me anyway, I know there's a balance, but it's not for everybody. So I've chosen, when I come across those discussions, many times I just keep scrolling through the next one. I can't speak to any of that because it hurts me too much. I think probably because that's my fear deep down is, am I doing enough to keep the cancer at bay? But then it comes full circle back to what you said, but I'm always trying to get as much knowledge as I can to make the best decision I can.
In the beginning, did you find yourself asking yourself, why me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you have a family history of breast cancer?
Nope. Nope. And I actually got genetic testing done. I don't have any markers for any cancer. And I got the genetic testing done probably, oh gosh, I lose track of time, maybe 6 years ago, 7 years ago. So it wasn't right away, because at the time, I already had metastatic. So what difference would it make? But I talked with my oncologist I have now, and I said, but what about my sons and my nieces and nephews? Wouldn't that be good information? She said, absolutely. So yeah, I have no markers. My mom's mom died of cancer, but I think it was like stomach cancer. And one of my mom's cousins died of cancer, but it wasn't breast cancer. So, but for my family tree, there's no direct lineage that, that I know of, going back 3 generations, that there's no cancer. So yeah, I did say, what is going on? And, it's kind of like, why am I still here?
Mm.
I don't know. I can guess. My guess would be that I didn't handle stress the most appropriate way throughout my life. Maybe that built up, maybe that affected my immune system, broke it down so that it couldn't attack the cancer, and it just started growing. Because, I do believe that everybody has cancer cells just kind of hanging out in their body, but our immune system, gets rid of them. So for me, I believe it was a break, just intellectually, I don't know how else to go with it. I think it was a breakdown in my immune system. And my next thought is, okay, well, why would that occur? Because I ate pretty healthy, I exercised, but I really don't think I handled stress or things that really bothered me very well. I think I pushed it down too far. That's the only thing I can come up with.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
How old were you when you were diagnosed with initially with breast cancer?
42.
Wow.
Yeah.
So had you had any traumatic experiences, any trauma in your life, grief experiences, I imagine, because I'm going to be 42 very soon.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've lived 3 lifetimes in some ways.
Yeah.
Are you open to sharing about that?
Yeah, I am to a certain extent, but yeah, in answer to your question, yes. So so one of the bigger ones, which turned out just wonderfully, was my husband and I were married, and then we got a divorce, and then we got remarried. And that was just an awful, awful time for me. But we reconnected, and we got remarried, and he's just the absolute best. I don't think I'd be doing as well as I am if it weren't for him. He's allowed me to, he provides for us so well. He provides for the boys. He's just an amazing dad. He takes care of me better than, he's such a wonderful man. We just couldn't get it together the first time, but we got it together pretty good for the second. But that was an awful time for me. I actually left California and moved back to Michigan. I didn't know what I was, I just thought, all right, I'm going back home, so to speak. Lived with my mom for a while. And and during a conversation that Chris and I were having, probably about 5 months after I'd been there, and he said, you know, I want you to come back. So eventually, you know, without going through all the details, yes, I came back, we got remarried, and so we're living normal marriage life with, you know, all of its ups and downs. You know, just because we decided to get married doesn't mean remarried, that it hasn't been a cakewalk, but you know, life's just hard. So you make this commitment to you know, we made this commitment, and you know, especially with Colin being a little guy, my stepson, I said, you know, if I'm going back, I'm not leaving, because I can't do this to Colin. He was like 2 years old. And so we've made a pretty good life. And anyway, that's a whole nother topic. But so that was stressful. You know, growing up, everybody has, you know, family stuff. And I just don't think I was really understood how to handle the stresses in life when you're growing up, and anxieties you have as a teenager, and, you know, then going off to college. And there's times I think I had guardian angels, like literally picking me. There must have been 10 of them picking me up by my shoulders and saying, let's leave this situation and we'll just go over here for a little while. So there's many times when I look back and I didn't follow my instinct, or I didn't follow my heart during those times when I think, okay, maybe I should have. And I don't mean this in a Pollyanna way, but then I don't think I would be married. I wouldn't have come out to California. I wouldn't have met Chris. We wouldn't have gone through our stuff. I wouldn't have these, you know, this wonderful family by making other choices. So, but within the everyday life, I believe I just didn't handle the stress appropriately for my body. I just kept pushing it down, pushing it down, pushing it down. And then it would come back up, maybe in inappropriate ways. Maybe I would burst into tears when the situation didn't really warrant it. But it was what was happening with me. That's the only thing I can think of, other than, if you want to think of, was I exposed to some weird chemical, or, you know, we lived, you know, pretty clean life. You know, in college, you know, I drank like everybody. Graduate, you know, I didn't drink a lot, because I mentioned that because they say, you know, alcohol consumption is one of the things, you know, you need, that can contribute to breast cancer. But, you know, when I got the metastatic diagnosis, I stopped drinking. Like, maybe I have 3 glasses or 4 glasses of wine a year. But so that's what I reflect upon. How did I handle the stressful situations in my life? Not very well, not very gracefully. I try to do a better job now. You know, sometimes I don't. But when I don't, that means it signals to me that I need to take more time to figure out, well, what's really happening, you know, within me. Because I do have to say that there is a certain part of me that, you know, takes it for granted that I'm going to, like, everybody, you know, before I had cancer, I just took it for granted that I was going to wake up the next morning. And I can, to a certain extent, but there's just some days I just say, all right, I'm not trying not to think about it and just, you know, pretend I don't have it. But I can't do that very often, because that's, like I mentioned earlier, it's this unwanted house guest that's here, and I have to learn how to live with it. So if I ignore it for too long, it doesn't serve me well. I did go through counseling when I was in my 20s. And I'll never forget, you know, we were talking about the mind-body connection. I was sitting it was group counseling. And then you'd meet, on a different time, you'd meet one-on-one with the counselor. During this group counseling, someone was speaking, and I remember getting very agitated. I can't remember what the topic was, but I had this thing on my chin, like it just like, my skin just opened up. It was like a boil almost that appeared within a half hour, because whatever is being said in the group, I was afraid to share. And so because I didn't like let it out of my body with the words, it was coming out in this boil on my chin. I know I'm touching my chin right now, but that had never happened before. And I didn't take a clue from that, like, oh, a big enough clue, I don't think. Like it wasn't a big enough moment to say, oh my gosh, I have to think about what's happening with me emotionally and my thoughts and how I'm handling all this stuff. But that, I still think of that today. Actually, I can still feel it happening and looking in the mirror going, and it was ugly. So looking back on that, reflecting back, yes, I was not handling whatever was upsetting me appropriately. So my body was doing it, speaking out about it. So my body did it for me. And I think that, and there's one other thing that happened, I can't remember, but so hindsight, of course, 2020, I just have to believe that I wasn't handling the stresses in my life appropriately and when I say appropriately, I mean to like resolve them, get them out. So I wouldn't feel so anxious or guilty or shameful or, whatever was happening, so that I could resolve it in some way that was in a healthy way. So that's the only thing when I say, why me? I don't really say why me anymore, but early on I did for sure. That's kind of what I come up with.
Thank you for sharing. I think it's a good message that people need to hear, that, again, we don't need to get a diagnosis to check
Right.
in with ourselves and to like step back from our lives and take a bird's eye view of, why am I feeling this way? What is going on? It's like when we don't go to the doctor when we're feeling well and healthy. We go to the doctor when we're not feeling so good.
Right.
And that is also true of our mental health. So let's not get to that point, right? Like, you mentioned support many times throughout this interview so far. The message boards that you're on, the team that you surrounded yourself with, the medical team. It's like you have a lot of different teams, don't you? Like the medical team, your family team, your friend team, the online team. And obviously that's been a huge contributor to your success so far in managing this. What has given you the most joy for the future?
Probably my kids. They're such amazing people that like our oldest was over for dinner last night. Our middle son, he's coming back in 2 weeks for family game night, and our youngest right now, bless his heart, he's living with us, for the COVID and going to school and online, but he's taken a week vacation, so he's not at home. And I just love being around them. I mean, and then I look forward to when my husband comes home at night, because he keeps me afloat. He's so smart. He's a great sense of humor. But when the first word when you ask me, joy, it just it goes right to my kids, and they've always been a reason why I keep moving forward. Like I believe for me, and it's not true for everybody, sugar is not good for me, but I love ice cream and I love cookies. And I'll open up the cookie jar and say, no, if you can't do it for yourself, just do it for the boys. All right. And the cookie jar lid goes back on, and I'm not saying I'm perfect. I eat cookies and I have some ice cream and, all that stuff. But when I know I'm really not supposed to be doing something, I already know it's not good for me, but I just want it. They are the ones that pull me back, because I want to be here for as long as possible so that I can just be part of their lives. So, I mean, that's the big thing. Little things are like yesterday, I was driving out to my appointment it's just a regular appointment with my oncologist, and the Spinner song, I think it's called I'll Be There or something. Or anyway, the Spinner song came on and I love it. And I just cranked it up, and I'm at the stoplight and I'm just dancing in my seat. And there's all these people around me, but I don't care anymore. Like before, like, well, I don't want to do anything, I'll be embarrassed. It's like you say, it took the cancer diagnosis. Like, oh, it doesn't matter if people are looking at me funny, because I'm enjoying the song and I'm just kind of dancing and moving in my seat. And the song played for most of my drive out, and that gave me joy, a little piece of joy. There's, like I said earlier, there's these two gals who post on Facebook and they take pictures, and there's somebody, she takes pictures of rocks that have been painted. Someone has taken the time to paint rocks and they place them around our area. And I think, oh, that is so cool. Part of me, I think, has always been there, to find these little moments, and to tune in and to really acknowledge what's happening. But I just do that even more. And if I get one of those a day, then that's pretty cool. And actually, I honestly, I seek something out every day that's going to bring me a little peace, whether you want to call it happiness or joy or positivity. Even if I'm laying in bed and I can't even move it's going to take just like, okay, I got to roll over. Here we go. And it's so hard to imagine. How can you feel so awful and weak that you can't even roll over in bed? But that's where I was. And I hear in this, maybe I'll hear my husband downstairs on the phone, or, in earlier days, I'll hear my kids and they're all talking and laughing. And I'm so sad I can't be down there with them at that moment. But then I'm so happy I can hear them laughing and talking, because I'm still here. So
FaceTime.
Hmm?
You can FaceTime in the same house.
Yeah. Well, they'll come up. I mean, they would come up when they were, younger. They'd come up, they'd sit in bed with me, and maybe we'd watch a TV show or a movie, or they just talk to me. So things like that. But it's those little times, like, oh, I can't be downstairs, but I can hear them. Or, like you said, FaceTime. Last year, I haven't been able to see my mom in over a year, but we can FaceTime, and we were playing Hangman for a while, on FaceTime. So I think for me, it's really important to find something every day that just has, a ray of sunshine that comes through. And some days it's, clear skies and sunny, and some days it's cloudy, but you can still see a little bit coming through. And I think that's that keeps me going. My kids, my husband, and going from the core, and then sort of is the opposite of of peeling an onion. You start like with the core and I'll just ripple effect out. So.
I love that. I love that. Hold on one second. Let me take off because can you hear my fan on my laptop?
Nope. I can't.
I think it's getting pretty hot, actually. Okay. So let me, because I have that one final question for you.
Okay.
I think it needs to like.
Yeah, I can't hear the call.
I just need to like let it air out a little bit. Oh, this thing. I don't know what I'm going to do. Let's see. I'm just looking through my notes and I'm going to edit this out. So.
Okay.
So that usually the joy question is the last one, but I do want to, I'm going to edit this part out too, but I'm just in advance.
Yeah.
While my computer cools off a bit or gets some air. That Scott Peck's book. And I have debated titling this episode, The Road Less Traveled, 18 years living with cancer, because it has been 18 years, but I find it interesting you say 17.
Yeah, it's 17 with metastatic and then, 18 with since original diagnosis. Yeah. And I think, I say 17 because normally I say it started 18, but the metastatic is such a huge, it's my life now. And I thought, the first diagnosis, like I said, I had surgery, then I had started treatment in March. It was over in August. And I thought, all right, here we go, kind of not totally back to normal, but I didn't have to fear the cancer at that point. I thought, okay, I'm done. And at that time, they didn't even tell you that, oh, you got to watch out because, 30% of stage 1 through 3, 30% of the women, I don't know how it applies to men, but for the women, they'll get metastatic cancer. 70% won't, but 30% is kind of a big chunk. They will get it. So, but no one talked about that then. Because there were hardly anybody with stage 4 breast cancer. So, but yeah,
do you know the statistic of that?
Of
stage 4 metastatic?
Like how? So yeah, 30.
Like the population?
I think it's 30% are metastatic. I'd have to.
30% of all breast cancer diagnoses are metastatic.
Yeah, let me.
Well, it's a small number. I mean, you're an example of a small set of warriors. I mean, you're warriors. You're like,
yeah,
Wonder Women. You're cancer Wonder Women. Defying the odds.
Yeah, it's about, so 30% of women diagnosed with early stage, which is 1 through 3, will develop metastatic. But so I know that one. There's another, they call it de novo. If you're diagnosed de novo, which means like right off the bat. Like if you go, you go in and I've got a back pain. So they do scans and say, oh, you have breast cancer. So and it's metastatic, it's in your bones. So they call that de novo. I don't know what percentage of the de novo are of the whole metastatic population. I don't know that percentage.
How about as far out as you, like those who have lived maybe 15 years or more, who have survived, who are surviving 15 years or more out?
That actually is something that they're working on. Like, I know the University of Wisconsin a couple of years ago, they were doing a study trying to figure that answer out. There's another, I think it's called I don't know if it's the MBC project. I don't know if that's the official name, but that actually, they're trying to figure that out. It's data hasn't been kept on that. So they don't really know. Like, of the metastatic population, what percentage is, how many years? Like, I think they say, and again, and I don't really look at, I tell, if I'm talking to someone, I'll say, don't look at, when you go online, don't look at the percentage of mortality, because one, it's not you, which is the biggest thing. And two, is some of this information is really out of date. Because every woman's body makeup is so different. And you're going to react differently to whatever medication you have. So, for example, I'm called what's triple positive. I've got hormone receptor positive and HER2 new positive. So those estrogen, progesterone, and HER2 positive is triple positive. Oh, God, what was I going to say? What was I just saying? I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Fine. Anyway, it's gone. What was I saying right before that?
We were talking about the statistic of people living 15 plus years out.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Don't look online because when I was on the chemo drug Abraxane, it was all I could do to squeak out a year. But there's another lady who I know on the boards. She's been doing it for 5 years. With no problem. So her her chemical makeup, she can handle it, and I couldn't. So that's why I tell women, don't look at survival rates, because it's not who you are. It's not
Good advice.
Yeah, it's not taking into consideration, everything about you. But so an answer, they're working on those numbers now, because up until, I think I answered the Wisconsin survey, 4 years ago. And I don't know where they are, on it. I signed up, give me the results, but I haven't gotten anything. But that's a big question out there that's getting more and more attention. So, which is good.
I want to read something that you shared in your email, and I had asked you the question, having lived this long with cancer in your body, is it the will to live, or is it just not your time? And in part of your response was, and I just want to read this out loud, you mentioned M. Scott Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled, and you said the first line is, life is difficult and goes on. This is a great truth, one of the greatest truths. It is a great truth because once we truly see this truth, we transcend it. Once we truly know that life is difficult, once we truly understand and accept it, then life is no longer difficult. Because once it is accepted, the fact that life is difficult no longer matters. What a beautiful passage. Thank you. I've not read that book. That passage makes me want to read that book. And maybe actually I did read it in high school, but you're young and
Right.
everything, and you don't care about philosophical things necessarily. But I love what you shared in your email, and what you talked about was that your free will and how we live our lives affects the quality of our life and possibly how long we have on this earth. And it's right, you speaks to that control piece that you said. It's what I have control over. Mm-hmm. That you put your focus to, your breathing, your mindset, your body, all these areas, the whole body health and wellness. But can you share in your words a little bit about that? Because maybe you've reflected on it more since that email.
Yeah, so I do believe how we live our lives can affect our longevity. And then on the, so for example, if I chose to not do, conventional medicine and go down the natural path, or, I would not be here. I would have died a long time. I would have died years ago because my cancer is aggressive. So, but if I truly believe that, traditional medicine was not the path for me, and I didn't, then I don't know, I wouldn't be here. If I believe for me that if I didn't, when I got the diagnosis, if I didn't try to start looking at things differently and, that and changing a little bit of how I live my life that I've talked about, that would have affected the quality of my life. So I do believe we have the free will of how do we approach these things that happen in our lives. The thing I don't know, maybe it's the other side of the same coin that I can't figure out is, I think I put in that email, the cousin of a friend of mine was shot driving home from work. He's in his car driving home, and he was shot and in the hospital, and he died a week later. So he doesn't have any control over that. A dear friend of mine's son was, diagnosed with brain cancer, and the way they live their life, I believe in her ability and their whole, to be, I can't imagine a stronger advocate. I know that she and they added years to his life, but he died. They didn't have any control of that ultimately. So I think I put in my email, and this would be like a whole nother discussion. I can go down that rabbit hole pretty quickly. It's like, there's things I understand we can affect, how our reactions to something. Like I've reacted poorly to instances in my life and tried to make amends. That's on me. I have control of that. And there's all these other things that happen that I don't have control over. And I think though that sort of, it's not I don't know what you call it. Is that a dichotomy? Anyway, that brings me to that first line and paragraph in The Road Less Traveled, because life is difficult. It's also joyful, and it's everything, but it's not going to be easy. And I think I knew that early on in my life. And I was given that book by a friend of my mom's, and I started reading it. I think once I understood that it is just difficult, like it says, you say, okay, it's going to be hard. So when the hard stuff comes, I'm not being punished. I'm not being singled out. It's just, life is hard, but it's not hard all the time. It's just part of what happens in life. But it helped me to understand that for the circumstances that I can't control, stuff's going to happen, and it's going to be and on the scale, it can be, okay, easily handled, or it can be just horrific event and everything in between. Like I was listening to some of your other guests, and I cried through many of the podcasts. I think, oh my gosh, how did they get through what, they got through? Because sometimes life happens to you. It doesn't, so when I say life is difficult or hard, it doesn't justify or minimize or rationalize all the crap that's out there. It's just, it is out there. So I learned, okay, I'm not hiding because, oh my God, what's the next bad thing that's going to happen? I don't approach it like that. I just know that I'm not being singled out. Everybody has a hard life at one point or another. Everyone has, so it's not just me, and I'll tell my kids, or I'll tell friends, if you see someone who has it totally together, just know that that's not them all the time. I remember one of my sister-in-laws told me that, right when her first child was born, she answered the door and, he just spit up, or, she looks a wreck. It just, and here she opened the door to her neighbor who was totally put together. Her baby was in a cute outfit. And do you want to go to the park? And she was barely hanging on by her fingernails, and just thinking, oh my God, I can't look like that. But then I don't know, it was said in the conversation that, well, of course she looks like that, because you're not going to go outside and knock on someone's door unless it's a good day, you're put together, everything's going along smoothly. So you didn't see her yesterday, and you're not going to see her 3 hours from now. So it's that kind of thing of, if you're having a hard time, it's just part of life. And
putting things in perspective, right? Because people are more likely to show their highlight reel, right?
Yeah.
In person, online, whichever it is, it doesn't matter. It's
right. Yeah. And then you find those people who you can show the ugly stuff, or have the ugly cry with, or share all the difficulties in life. But when I read that, I was younger, and it just helped me to understand, like, okay, it's not just me, and hopefully I'll be able to handle whatever comes down the road. I already knew that things could happen, but it was during a time in my life when I looked at everybody else, like, my sister-in-law looked at this woman and said, oh my God, they seem like they've got it all together. And I was sort of grasping at straws, because there's a time in my life when I felt like I was hanging on by my fingernails. And so that kind of helped me level the plane, not level, that's not the right word. It helped me to cope better with things that would, when I did have a hard time. And it also, if you read the book more, it kind of helps you to understand how you can approach situations in a healthier way, or a more cognitive or centered way. At least it did for me. So.
Intentional too, right?
Intentional, yes. You have
that word again. And I want to mention too, because what I've heard now, like 2 hours, which is like amazing, like whoa, is hope.
Yes.
But hope has been like the undercurrent of your whole experience so far.
Yeah. It is.
Because if we don't have that, what do we have, right?
Right.
Especially someone who's facing and is going through exactly what you're going through. Like, if you didn't have that for 18 years, like, oh my gosh, like, what would life be like, right?
Right. It's carried me through. You hope that the next day is going to be better, or you hope that
and gratitude when it is.
Yeah, there's a new,
Gratitude. Yeah.
yeah. It's, you know, hoping for the best in situations. And yeah, that's,
That ripples too in the
yeah,
relationships you have with people close to you. Is if you have hope, it gives them hope.
it does. Yeah, thank you. You're helping me very well here. Yeah, I think it is hopeful. It's something that I think I carry in my heart. I carry, because otherwise it's, if I focus on the times when, you know, I can't get out of bed, or I can't brush my teeth, or I can't take a shower for 4 days because I'm not feeling good, I have the hope that, okay, well, I will be able to do that in 2 weeks, maybe. So, I haven't reached the end of the line, because I have the hope that there are more medications in the pipeline, and there are more trials, and science is working, you know, for all of our collective benefit. That's, I actually haven't thought what it would feel like if I didn't have hope. So that's, I think, why I was pausing, because I think I just have it. I'm hopeful that things will get better, or continue to be, you know, stable. I know eventually, actually, you know, I eventually know that the medication I'm on will stop working, because I've been through, I think, 12 different treatment regimens over the years. So I know at some point it will, but I'm hoping that it will be, you know, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. I think the longest I've been on a treatment was 3.5 years before I had to change. So I'm hopeful that I will be on this for a long time. And then I'm hopeful that there's a new medication that I will be able to take that will knock the cancer back. And so as I'm talking, I'm just thinking, if I didn't have that hope, I probably wouldn't get out of bed, honestly. So thank you for naming that. Yeah.
I had a thought and it escaped my brain. Hold on a second. Oh, I can't think of it. It's about hope.
Um,
Um,
you could do a whole podcast on hope.
oh my gosh.
I mean, you know,
This is why I love this podcast, why I love podcasting, because the people that do come on here, they give hope. They have hope. They bring other people hope
yeah,
that no matter life's challenges, and I've heard some really horrific stories, that there is a way out.
mhm,
And if we have to hold on to hope by our fingernails, maybe that's the one thing we can do that day. Maybe that's the only thing we can do that day.
yeah. That's actually, you're giving me goosebumps. That's a very powerful, a very powerful thought and statement. Really, that's so true.
What do you want? This is my question. I thought of it. What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh my gosh. I don't know.
I can tell you what I see.
Okay.
Because if I were, this is my other thought, if I were a betting man, I would bet that one of your top 5 strengths is positivity.
Yeah, it is.
But to never lose hope, that's a pretty good legacy.
Yeah. To never lose hope. I think you're right.
The greatest lesson that you can share with people.
Yeah.
And you're doing it right now on this podcast. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there
Yeah.
anything else that you would like to share?
Um, I guess as far as the metastatic part, when you're first diagnosed, and this is kind of circling back to the beginning, you will have loss. You, like I say, you'll have the loss of sense of self. You'll have the loss of whatever you were, able to do physically. You'll have the loss of being able to plan for the future. You have the loss of the luxury of believing you're going to live, another 30 years, right? Because if you don't have a medical condition which can limit your longevity, you just, I mean, to be healthy, you just have to assume, all right, I'm living a long life, because of course anything can happen. But most people, I mean, I know, you just assume you're going to get up and you're going to do these things that you want to accomplish in life, and you're going to have the time to do it. So you lose that luxury. And in the beginning, it feels like you're dropped into a foreign country with no map and you don't know the language. But, take your time, follow your instincts, get to a point where you're okay with your approach to the disease and the cancer, just to settle a little bit, and then allow yourself to know that because you've had all these losses of things that you had before, doesn't mean that your life can't have the joy and the positive things too from here on out. It's going to be completely different. It's going to be something that you don't want, and you're going to cry and you're going to be mad and you're going to scream and you're going to do all these things, and that's okay. And it probably needs to happen. But to understand, and I guess, you have the hope that it's going to be better. It's not going to be the same, but it can get better. And I say that very humbly, because I know that for some women, it doesn't get better. And tragically, they don't have as long as they want. And so, I take that very seriously and to heart. And for me, I just had to, sometimes I call it jumping from one lily pad to another. I have the hope that I'm going to get to the next lily pad, whichever one that may be. Whether it's a new treatment or brushing my teeth or taking the dog for a walk or just making it through a day on the couch. But to try to keep that little kernel of hope in there, like you said earlier, hanging on by your fingernails, if that's all you can do, that'll get you to the next day, I think. Because life does completely change, but it doesn't mean that what you have, whatever time we have left, it can be good at certain times. You can find, joy. You can find happiness. It may not be how long you want it or when you want it. Maybe you have to look for it where you didn't have to before, but it's there. And to just have that hope. And
I read a
follow your instincts, because they're there. They're there for a reason.
amen to that.
Yeah.
I read a something today. I think it's from Genesis. I'm not even sure, but what you said made me think of it. God gives us what we need, not what we want.
Mm-hmm.
And we could have a whole nother topic conversation about spirituality, and I'm all about that.
Yeah.
And because we only really touched on that, like maybe a little bit more
Yeah.
so like in the email and just a little bit here, but I'm
Yeah.
very interested in hearing the role of spirituality for you and all of that. Is there anything you can share briefly about the role of spirituality and faith for you?
Um, well, it's an evolving process for me. I grew up in the Unitarian Church, so I didn't really understand spirituality until I was probably in my 20s. I didn't get that. The minister we had at the time when I was growing up, I thought he was just a great man. He was, well, I think, if I'm using the term right, if I remember correctly, he was more of a humanist. But I think that's where I started to learn about the connection. You know, we're not this just autonomous vessel here, on earth. We connect to the earth, we connect to people. Our actions and thoughts and words, they all have meaning, and it affects other people. So I thought he was, I learned, I guess, you start at, what, I don't know how old I was, little, and you grow up and you sort of have these things ingrained. But then as I got older, I had a sense that there was something else out there. My best friend she grew up in the Catholic Church, and I would go to church with her, and, some of the stuff would speak to me. And I've spent my life kind of exploring different churches, and wrestling with the different, I don't even know if philosophy is the right word, but the approaches of different churches. And I don't fit into one category. Like I'm not a Catholic or Protestant or Methodist. So I realized that. And so for the spirituality part of me, it's going to be probably an ongoing process for me until the day I die, probably. I believe in the power of prayer. I believe that there's something out there, and whether it's God or Buddha or the universe, there's just something out there that connects people that's unexplainable to me. I believe in science. I don't think science and religion are separate. I look at this whole magnificent world, we live in the various states that it comes in. It's miraculous to me that the earth even exists. So that in and of itself to me means there's something greater out there. And people can say, well, yeah, but it's, scientifically, this is what happened. And I agree, but I think, but it's miraculous. I'm sitting at home and we have I'm talking to you. You're in North Dakota, I'm in California, we see each other. I'm still amazed by television,
And how about us as as a body?
Yes, I was literally
Cellular, like a cell, we are made up of cells.
yes,
Just accumulated cells.
yes. Yes, you read my mind. That in the body is just like I'm speaking and talking and forgetting my words. And, I've got medicine in my body keeping me alive. And so these things to me are miraculous. And then, going back to, there's tragedy that happens in life. And I wish it didn't, but we can't get around it. It is there. It's always going to be there. There's good and there's evil. There's always going to be good. There's always going to be evil.
And there's cause and effect.
Cause and effect. Yes.
A natural law.
Yes. All of that. So I absorb all of that, and I can't and that affects, it's still a work in progress. So I don't have for me, it's a luxury because I grapple with this to say, yes, this is what I believe in. And it's a more of a straight path. For me, it's just all these things that come into play every day. But I think it comes back to I have to hope. I have to believe in the goodness of people. I have to, if you just take away the evil that happens, and everyone has their own definition of evil, but it's always going to be there. But I have to believe in the goodness of people and the ability to change and kindness and love out in the world. But I can open up the Bible and I can read something in Proverbs that just is just beautiful. I wish I could memorize these things, but I can't. So, I read the Bible. I read philosophy. It's one of my brothers and my mom and I and his girlfriend were talking about Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato, and texting. And it's, all that to me is just fascinating. And unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to have enough time on earth to figure it out. But I enjoy these conversations I have with them. I enjoy reading about it. I have a book that's called The Power of Prayer, for Mom, The Power of Prayer for Women. And I'll read some of it I don't get it and I don't agree with, but I can always find something that speaks to me. So, and whether it's effective or not, I feel better. It's what I incorporate in. And then I will say there's little things that happen. Like just last week, was having a conversation with our son and my husband. We were in the kitchen. And what I realized had happened is that I was playing with my rings. I had three rings. And one of them had slipped off and had fallen on the carpet under the table. I didn't know that. I woke up the next morning, I look at my hand, there's only two. I'm like, oh my gosh. I had to retrace my steps. And I said this little prayer. It doesn't work all the time. It's like, what is lost may be found. And I went through the garbage. I went everything twice. I retraced my steps all day. And I thought, I'm just going to sit down at the table and cry. And there I see it under the table on the carpet. Well, were my prayers answered? I don't know. Would someone have found it eventually? Absolutely. But I had, things like that happen through life that make me catch like the intuition, I think, is part of spirituality. There's some connection there. Does God answer prayers? I don't know. Because there's millions of prayers that go unanswered. And then that's a whole nother, podcast. But for spirituality, for me, I just have the hope, the goodness in people, the connection that we make with others. I think if you allow yourself to feel deeply, you interact with others at a different level. Like I'm talking about that, maybe to the core. Not, I'm having what are the empath? Is that the right word?
Yep, that's me.
Yeah. So to me, it's all intertwined, but I do believe there is something out there. I don't exactly know what it is. I don't believe that, there's a punishing God. That's one thing that no one said to me was, oh, you're being punished. Thankfully, I've heard other friends of mine who've lost children and they will be told that from a religious, which I think is horrific, but
horrible.
Yeah. So I don't believe, I think spirituality is love and hope and kindness and helping each other and the goodness of people.
Do you know the shortest sentence in the Bible?
I knew that I'd forgotten. No, what?
Jesus wept.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if that isn't humanizing enough.
Yeah.
For all of us.
Yeah.
Like it's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he moved his feet. He prayed and he moved his feet.
Yep. Yeah. He a lot of good lessons come from him. So many good lessons. Yep.
Oh, you are magnificent in my eyes.
Oh, you're very kind.
And
Words.
I thank you for being here. And I've absolutely loved this conversation. I hope we have another one again. I would love to have you back sometime.
I'll come
And
sometime. You have a gift.
oh,
Truly have a gift. You're doing what you're supposed to be doing. So it's really my honor to be part of this podcast. It really, truly is. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. I feel fully aligned with what I'm doing. So yes, it feels very good to me.
Good.
It is my joy for sure. I don't get paid for it either. This is just, I'm just here to give you space, give others space, and bring hope to people. And I think you very much so did that today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Victoria.
Where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Well, so I used to have a website like 10 years ago, but that's gone. But I'm on Instagram. It's at Blue Line Crossing. And I'm on Facebook, but it's closed Facebook. But I think you can message me still through Facebook if, and I've done that, I've connected with people who've messaged me, and we have conversations on the messenger part of the Facebook.
Is there a Facebook group for those diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer that you could send a link to me and I can put in the show notes so that they could request to join?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. I would love to do that.
Yeah.
Anyone listening to this?
Yeah. And anyone who's listening, it's, who has metastatic cancer, this group is, it's really a godsend. The women on it are so helpful, so caring, very knowledgeable. And you'll get every type of breast cancer, every characteristic of breast cancer on there. So I will absolutely do that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And reach out to her on Instagram at Blue Line Crossing if you just want to give her thanks for sharing her story and telling her how magnificent she is and send her some good healing juju. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to me rabble on.
Many blessings to you and your family. There was so much, there's a lot of questions I didn't even get to. So again, I wanted to ask about the relationships with your husband and how you both have, how he's navigated this and how it's looked for your kids. And there's so much more that we can talk about. So I definitely plan to have you back.
Thank you.
So thank you. And remember, when you unleash your heart, you unleash your life. Much love.
Thank you.
Hold on.